thought sneaking into that abandoned amusement park would be the dumbest mistake we made that night. I was completely wrong, because something else was already inside that park, watching us from the dark. What we saw that night would later match the description of someone dangerous still out there. Back then, I hated camping more than anything, and my dad forced me to go every summer. That year, I finally convinced him to let me bring my friend Leo, just to make it bearable. Leo loved camping, which somehow made everything worse, because he was actually enjoying all of this. Everything felt off when we realized the campsite was built right beside a full amusement park. The place didn't feel normal, like two completely different worlds were forced together in the worst way. Later that night, Leo whispered that we should sneak in and climb one of the roller coasters. I hesitated for a moment, but the idea felt just dangerous enough that I couldn't say no. We waited until everyone at the campsite was asleep before quietly slipping out into the darkness. The air felt colder than before, and every sound suddenly seemed louder than it should have. We kept our flashlights low, trying not to draw attention as we made our way toward the fence. The closer we got, the more the park lights felt unnatural, like they didn't belong there. Leo climbed first without hesitation, like this was exactly the kind of thing he lived for. I followed right after, trying not to think about how easy it was to get inside. We dropped down into the park and immediately felt like we weren't supposed to be there. Everything was silent, except for distant humming from rides that should have been completely shut off. We moved carefully between buildings, trying to stay out of sight in case security was nearby. It felt like a game at first, until I realized we might not be the only ones sneaking around. We froze for a second, both staring into the darkness, trying to figure out if we actually saw something. Leo whispered that it was probably just security, but his voice didn't sound convinced at all. I kept staring into that same spot, because something about it didn't feel like a normal person. Then suddenly, the figure moved quickly across a small patch of light before disappearing again. That was when I realized it wasn't security, because no one moved like that. We stayed completely still, trying not to make a single sound as the silence grew heavier. I could feel my heartbeat getting louder, like it might give away exactly where we were hiding. Leo slowly pointed toward the gap again, and this time, I saw the figure more clearly. He was crouched low like us, but his posture looked twisted and completely unnatural. For a second, he stopped moving entirely, and I had this terrible feeling he was looking right at us. Then, he suddenly moved again, stepping into the light just enough for us to finally see his face. His clothes looked torn and dirty, like he had been wandering for days without stopping. There was something wrong with the way he stood, like one side of his body didn't move right. And then, I noticed the dark stains across his face that didn't look like dirt. Leo grabbed my arm tightly, and I knew he saw it too without either of us saying anything. The man tilted his head slightly, as if he was trying to listen or figure out where we were. Every second felt longer as we stayed frozen, hoping he wouldn't come any closer to us. Then, he took a slow step forward, and the sound echoed louder than it should have. That was enough for us to realize we needed to move before he got any closer. We slowly started backing away, trying not to make noise while keeping our eyes on him. We kept moving backwards slowly, trying to stay hidden while making sure he didn't suddenly rush us. I tried not to look away, but every instinct told me to turn and run immediately. Leo lightly shook his head, signaling me to stay calm, even though he looked just as scared. We ducked behind another building, trying to break his line of sight without making any sound. For a moment, everything went silent again, and I couldn't tell if he had followed us or stopped. I leaned forward just enough to peek around the corner, trying to spot any movement. At first I didn't see anything, and I thought maybe he had gone somewhere else. Then I noticed a shadow shifting near the ground like he was closer than we thought. My stomach dropped when I realized he was right on the other side of the wall. We both held our breath as footsteps stopped just a few feet away from where we were hiding. footsteps stayed still for a moment, and I felt like he knew exactly where we were hiding. I could hear slow breathing from the other side, and it didn't sound normal at all. Leo's grip tightened on my sleeve as we both realized how close this person actually was. Then, without warning, the footsteps shifted slightly, like he was turning toward our direction. That was enough for us, and we silently decided we had to get out immediately. We carefully stepped away from the wall, trying not to make even the smallest noise. The second we created enough distance, we turned and started moving faster through the park. I didn't look back, but I could feel something behind us, like we were being followed. We kept moving as fast as we could without running, trying not to draw attention. The fence finally came into view, and I felt a brief moment of relief. We rushed toward the fence, trying to stay quiet, even though every instinct told us to sprint. Leo grabbed the fence and started climbing immediately, without even checking behind us first. I followed right after, my hands slipping slightly on the cold metal as panic set in. Halfway up, I made the mistake of looking back to see if anything was behind us. For a split second, I thought I saw him standing in the distance, just watching us. He didn't move or run after us. He just stood there, like he didn't need to. That made it even worse, because it felt like we had just been allowed to leave. Leo whispered for me to keep moving, and I snapped out of it and climbed faster. We dropped down on the other side of the fence and immediately started moving away. Neither of us said anything as we walked back toward the campsite, trying to process everything. When we got back to the tent, neither of us even tried to sleep after what we saw. We just lay there in silence, replaying everything in our heads over and over again. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember was morning light. Everything felt almost normal again until a staff member came around making an announcement. He said there had been an incident nearby, and everyone needed to pack up immediately. They described a man matching exactly what we saw, disheveled, injured, and possibly covered in blood. Leo and I looked at each other instantly, knowing we had been dangerously close to him. We didn't tell anyone what we saw, because we were too afraid of getting in trouble. Even now, I still wonder if saying something could have helped catch him sooner. Because sometimes, I think about how he just stood there watching us before we escaped.
Stay.